My wife let her friend ruin our marriage, so I gave her a divorce she didn't see coming. I remember adjusting my tie in front of the mirror, my reflection too calm for the storm I had carefully orchestrated. Downstairs, Emily was laughing on the phone with Lisa, probably planning another weekend getaway I was neither invited to nor informed about. 6 months ago, I found out how deep their little alliance had gone, and I decided then, I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't beg, I'd simply let the end arrive like a well-delivered checkmate. I placed the signed divorce papers on the kitchen counter beside her favorite morning latte, no sugar, extra foam. It was poetic. She'd been so sure I was too weak, too spineless to walk away. Lisa had convinced her of that. But that's the thing about quiet men. We don't explode. We evolve. And sometimes, when we've evolved far enough, we become strangers who know exactly where the exit is. This is the story of how my silence became my power. Before everything unraveled, there was a time when I thought I was the luckiest man alive. I met Emily on a rainy Thursday afternoon in a bookstore tucked between two old buildings in the city. She stood in the poetry section, reading Neruda with such quiet intensity that I forgot what I came in for. I approached her, clumsily commented on her choice, and for some reason she smiled, like she'd been waiting for me to say something all along. We got coffee that same day and the next week, and the week after. Within 6 months I knew I wanted to marry her. Emily was a high school English teacher, full of passion for Shakespeare, Whitman, and life in general. She would quote sonnets while brushing her teeth, hum vintage jazz in the car, and always leave sticky notes with love quotes on the fridge. She made the mundane magical. I was a software engineer, structured, practical, always thinking in terms of logic and function, but with her I felt like a character in one of her romantic books, like I could live in metaphors. Our differences never felt like obstacles. They were bridges. She brought spontaneity to my routine. I grounded her dreams in reality. We spent weekends exploring old towns, hosting dinner parties with friends, and dreaming about the Victorian-style house we'd someday own. We'd talk about baby names, even when we weren't trying, just for fun. When I got a job offer from a big firm in Seattle, I turned it down because she wanted to stay near her students, and Lisa, her best friend since college. Lisa. Back then, I didn't mind her presence. She was loud, bold, and a bit overbearing, but I chalked it up to personality. Emily adored her, so I welcomed her into our lives. She was around often. Sunday brunches, holiday trips, even double dates when she was seeing someone. I thought it was harmless. Back then, I trusted easily. Our wedding was small but perfect. Emily wore her mother's veil, and I remember crying during my vows. We promised each other honesty, loyalty, and laughter, forever. And in the beginning, we meant it. Those first 2 years were golden. We built habits and traditions like Friday night takeout and watching bad reality TV just to make fun of it. Emily would always cuddle up next to me, fingers wrapped around mine like they belonged there. I worked hard, sometimes late into the night, but always made time for her. I brought her lunch at school when I could, surprised her with flowers for no reason, and learned to cook just to impress her. She once told me, "I've never felt safer with anyone." That moment stayed with me. I made it my mission to keep her feeling that way. She was the kind of woman who could light up a room, and I never got tired of watching her move through life with that quiet confidence. I was proud to be hers, even in mundane moments, folding laundry together, assembling IKEA furniture, sitting in silence while we read our books. I felt something rare. I felt at home. When she talked about having kids, I started researching the best family neighborhoods. When she wanted a dog, we rescued a golden retriever named Milo. We were, in every way that mattered, a team. I even opened a joint account for future savings, college funds, vacations, home renovations. Every dollar I earned, I saw as part of our shared dream. There was a night I'll never forget, our first anniversary. I had planned a surprise dinner on the rooftop of the building where we first kissed. I cooked every dish myself, fumbled with string lights, and almost set the napkins on fire trying to light candles. When she arrived, she was speechless, not because it was perfect, it wasn't, but because it was ours. She kissed me like we had just met again and whispered, "This is all I've ever wanted." She believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. When I doubted taking a risk to freelance part-time and build my own software app, she stayed up late helping me brainstorm names, colors, slogans. When I felt like giving up, she reminded me of my worth. Her belief was the fire behind so many of my early successes. And I believed in her too. I supported her when she fought with school administrators about curriculum changes, when she cried after losing a student to another district, and when she wanted to start a podcast for young women but was too scared to record her voice. I stood by her, always. So yes, when things started to change, subtly, then all at once, it wasn't just painful, it was unimaginable, because the woman I loved wasn't just my wife. She was the cornerstone of the life we built together. And I never thought anything or anyone could ever take that away. But little did I know, while I was busy building our future, someone else was whispering doubts into her ear. One comment at a time, one crack at a time. She went on to write, "A beautiful mind blossoms forth." It didn't happen overnight. That's the thing about distance. It doesn't announce itself. It creeps in. At first, it was subtle. Emily started canceling our Friday night rituals. "Too tired," she said. Then the sticky notes disappeared. I chalked it up to routine, to the natural cooling of marriage. But then, she started spending more time with Lisa. At first, I didn't mind. Best friends needed each other. But then came the whispers behind closed doors, the way their laughter would die the moment I entered a room. I'd find takeout receipts for dinners I wasn't invited to. Our shared calendar would suddenly have events marked girls only, scheduled without a word to me. When I asked her about it, she'd roll her eyes. "You wouldn't enjoy it anyway," it was always said with that sharp tone, half dismissal, half defensiveness. The kind that makes you feel guilty for even asking. Then came the comparisons. Lisa's new boyfriend had bought her a car. Lisa was planning a trip to Greece. Lisa never had to nag her man to fix things around the house. It was as if everything I did suddenly fell short. I once surprised Emily with a weekend getaway to a cabin, something she used to dream about, and she barely reacted. She spent most of the time texting Lisa. One night I overheard them on speakerphone. Lisa's voice was loud, animated. "You let him make all the decisions, girl? That's not how you win. Men need to be trained, not trusted." Emily laughed. Not the sweet belly laugh I loved. It was cold, performative, like she was proving loyalty to someone else. I began to feel like a guest in my own home. Our bedroom, once filled with warmth and quiet intimacy, turned into a place of polite silence. She started locking her phone. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd sigh like I was being dramatic. "You're too sensitive, Brian. Not everything's about you." But it wasn't just the emotional distance. It was the erosion of respect. She would cut me off mid-sentence during conversations with friends, correct me in front of others, dismiss my opinions with a look. I once offered to cook dinner for her and Lisa, only to hear Emily laugh and say, "Oh God, no offense, babe, but Lisa's palate is way more refined than your spaghetti skills." It stung, all of it, every little slight. Every moment she chose someone else's opinion over mine. And the worst part? I started believing I was the problem. I began to question myself, tiptoeing around conversations, second-guessing every gesture. I tried harder, flowers, date nights, surprise coffees, but nothing seemed to make a dent. Emily had begun to orbit a different sun, and I was slowly being pulled into shadow. One night, I came home early from work. The house was quiet. I walked in on Emily and Lisa sitting at the kitchen table, wine glasses in hand, whispering. They didn't notice me at first, and for a moment, I just watched them. Emily was leaning in, nodding. Lisa was smirking, satisfied. And then Lisa said something that would haunt me for months. "He's sweet, but he's holding you back. You know that, right?" Emily didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She just sipped her wine and whispered, "I know." That was the first night I truly felt something crack inside me. Not anger, not even sadness, just silence. A kind of numbness I hadn't known before. But I didn't say anything. Not yet, because part of me still hoped it was salvageable. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I married was slowly slipping away, and someone else was taking her place. Another shift I noticed was how Emily began redefining our past, subtly rewriting memories to fit some new narrative. She would recount stories to friends, but twist the details just enough to make me sound inattentive, selfish, or unambitious. The Emily I knew used to light up when talking about our early days. Now she rolled her eyes and said, "God, we were so naive back then." She started posting cryptic quotes on social media. Things like, "Sometimes you outgrow people who aren't growing," or "Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." Friends would comment with heart emojis or cheering GIFs. I was never mentioned. I wasn't tagged. I was invisible in her version of our life. I remember coming home one evening with a promotion announcement in hand. I was excited, proud even. I thought, maybe this will make her proud too. But when I told her, she barely looked up from her phone. "That's great," she said flatly. "Hey, can you take Milo for a walk? Lisa and I are working on her website tonight." She never asked me about the job again. By then, even Milo seemed to sense the tension. He would sit quietly between us at dinner, eyes darting, ears back, tail motionless. The house had grown colder, not physically, but emotionally, and I realized something chilling. I no longer felt welcome in my own marriage. And yet, I stayed. Because that's what people who love too much do. They stay, and they wait, and they hope. But some silences aren't meant to be filled. Some are warning signs. And I was about to ignore one final, blaring siren. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of ordinary day when you least expect your world to tilt. I was working from home, sipping lukewarm coffee and answering emails when a notification popped up on my bank app. A credit inquiry. Curious, I opened it, then froze. Someone had used my name to submit a mortgage pre-approval request. Confused, I dug deeper. Loan details, documents, all filled out. The contact number wasn't mine. The email was a slight variation of mine. Whoever had done this knew my information inside and out. At first, I thought it was identity theft. I called the bank ready to file a fraud report, but when the representative pulled up the file, her tone shifted. "Mr. Palmer, it appears your wife submitted this application jointly. She signed on your behalf." I stared at the wall for what felt like minutes. "Excuse me?" She included a secondary signer authorization. The signature matches her ID on file. My voice shook. "I never signed anything. I never agreed to this." She paused, sensing something was wrong. "Would you like to receive a copy of the application package?" "Yes." Immediately. When the documents arrived, I saw it all. Emily's handwriting, forged signature, even a note attached to the bank manager explaining that I was too busy with work and had verbally consented. My stomach twisted. At the bottom of the packet was a letter, clearly from Lisa, acting as a financial advisor, recommending the property. It wasn't just betrayal, it was deception, planned and layered. They hadn't even told me about the property, let alone that it would be purchased in Emily's name alone, and she had dragged my name into it to gain approval. I waited until she got home that evening. She walked in, humming, dropping her keys in the bowl like it was any other day. "We need to talk," I said. She blinked, caught off guard. "Okay, what's wrong?" I handed her the folder. "Explain this." Emily flipped through the pages, too fast at first, then slower, her face drained of color. She sat down. "Brian, I was going to tell you." "When?" "After you bought a house behind my back with forged documents? After your advisor, Lisa, signed off on a loan using my name?" Her voice grew defensive. "I didn't forge anything. I signed for you because you were always busy. I thought you'd be fine with it." "You thought I'd be fine with being lied to? With you buying a house that's only in your name?" She scoffed. "It's not like we don't share everything. It's just paperwork," Lisa said. I held up a hand. "Stop. Stop telling me what Lisa said. I married you, Emily, not her." She rolled her eyes. "Don't be so dramatic. You act like I committed a crime." "You did." My voice dropped, quiet and flat. "You used my identity without consent. That's fraud." She went silent. For a moment I saw something flicker in her eyes. Panic maybe, but it vanished quickly, replaced by a cold shrug. I did what I had to do. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while she snored beside me like nothing had changed. My mind raced, not just with the betrayal, but with the realization that she no longer saw me as her partner. I was an obstacle, a means to an end. The next few days confirmed what I feared. I overheard her talking on the phone with Lisa. She didn't bother hiding it anymore. "He's overreacting. Honestly, he should be thanking me." "Lisa, I swear, sometimes I wonder how I ended up with someone so small-minded." And then she laughed. That same hollow, performative laugh. "Lisa said I could have done so much better," she continued. "She thinks I settled too early. Maybe she's right." I wanted to walk in, say something, explode. But I didn't. I sat on the stairs, heart pounding, holding back everything inside me. Later that week, we attended a mutual friend's dinner party. I tried to act normal, but Emily treated me like an inconvenience. She interrupted me mid-sentence, corrected me about a story I was telling, and later, I overheard her whispering to a friend in the kitchen. "Brian's sweet, but he has no edge. He's too soft, you know, like comfortable socks. No one dreams of socks." It was supposed to be a joke, but it cut deeper than any insult ever had. The next morning, I stared at myself in the mirror, wondering how I had become so invisible in my own marriage, and for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt dumb. Still, I didn't react. Not outwardly. Not yet. Because the part of me that had been watching all this unfold was also planning. I started gathering things, quietly, carefully. Bank statements, emails, screenshots of conversations she'd carelessly left open. I even hired a friend in cybersecurity to trace the document logs from the mortgage application. Everything was building into a picture she had no idea I was painting. I stopped trying to fix things. No more late-night talks. No more desperate gestures. I became polite, cordial, almost pleasant. Emily mistook it for forgiveness. She smiled more, made coffee for two again, and even initiated a movie night. But I wasn't coming back. I was setting the stage. Lisa was emboldened too. She visited more often, spoke freely in my presence like I no longer mattered. Once I overheard her ask Emily, "Do you think he'll even notice when it's over?" They both laughed. What they didn't know was, I had already noticed. I had already left emotionally. I was just waiting for the right moment to make it official. Because love doesn't die with fire, it dies with ice, and I was finally cold. I wasn't as cold as I pretended to be. For weeks after discovering the truth, I lived in a haze. I went to work, I answered emails, I walked the dog, but inside I was wreckage, like a house gutted by fire but still standing on the outside. People would ask how I was, and I'd smile, tight, rehearsed, "I'm fine." But I wasn't. I was unraveling in silence. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake next to Emily, her back turned, her breathing steady. I'd stare at the ceiling and replay every moment. Our wedding, her laugh the first time she heard me snore, the way she used to say "I love you" without needing a reason. Where did all of that go? I wanted to believe this was salvageable, that this was just a phase, a mistake, a misunderstanding. I even drafted letters, apologies for things I didn't do, promises to try harder, to be more assertive, more manly, more whatever it was she thought I lacked. But then I received the email. It came from Lisa. Subject: careful what you do next. The body was short, no greeting, no signature. If you try to expose anything, just know Emily has proof of all the money she paid for your debts. You'll come out looking pathetic and unstable. You want to lose your career too? I stared at the screen, hands trembling. I didn't have any debts. We had always shared finances. What proof was she talking about? It didn't matter. That email wasn't about facts. It was about power. And that's when I realized I wasn't just being mistreated. I was being controlled. I closed the laptop, didn't respond, didn't confront Emily. I just left. Not permanently, not obviously. I told her I needed to visit a cousin a few towns away. Just a weekend, I said. She barely looked up from her phone. That weekend turned into 2 weeks. I stayed with an old college friend, Marcus. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a spare key and a beer and said, "You look like hell, man." I laughed for the first time in days. In that quiet apartment, I finally let myself fall apart. I cried, loud, ugly sobs. I screamed into pillows. I took long walks in the rain and let the cold numb me. I journaled for hours, pages and pages of questions I couldn't answer. How did I become this version of myself? When did I stop mattering? Why did I stay so long? I didn't contact Emily. I turned off my phone for days. When I finally checked, I had 27 missed calls, mostly from her. A few were angry, a few were tearful, but one voicemail stuck with me. "Brian, you're scaring me. Just come home, please." For a second, I almost did. Almost believed her panic meant something had changed. Then I remembered the email. I remembered Lisa. And I remembered how easily Emily had laughed while calling me small-minded. It wasn't that I didn't love her. It was that I couldn't love someone who saw me as disposable. Slowly through the wreckage, a sliver of resolve formed. I began to write, not to her, but for me. I outlined everything that had happened, every lie, every twist. I started therapy sessions via Zoom, talking to a woman named Denise, who gently peeled back my layers like they were old bandages. "You're grieving," she said. "Not just a relationship, but a reality you believed in." It clicked. I wasn't just heartbroken. I was mourning the death of a version of my life. And in mourning, something else stirred. Not rage, not revenge. Clarity. For the first time in months, I looked in the mirror and saw someone worth saving. After a week in Marcus's apartment, I stopped waking up with that sharp ache in my chest. It dulled into something quieter, an emptiness that gave me room to think. I started exercising again, not because I wanted to look better, but because I needed to feel control over something, anything. Marcus would drag me to the gym every other day, and by the third session, I felt sweat breaking through the fog. We talked late into the night. He didn't say you deserve better or she's evil. He asked real questions, the kind that made me reflect. If Lisa weren't in the picture, do you think Emily would still have done this? I didn't have an answer. That uncertainty haunted me more than anything. Then came the day I walked into a coffee shop and saw a man reading the same poetry book Emily held when we met. I almost walked out. But something stopped me. I watched him for a minute, calm, absorbed, and I remembered who I used to be, the man who believed in small magic, in love notes and bookstores, and shared glances over coffee. I missed that man. Not because of Emily, but because of me. I returned to Marcus's place and opened a blank document. This time, I didn't journal, I wrote a letter, not to Emily, not to Lisa. To myself. My life didn't become extraordinary. It became simple, quiet, and honest. I moved into a modest apartment near the park, with wide windows and morning sun. I cooked most of my meals, took Milo on long walks, read books I had long forgotten on dusty shelves. My days were predictable, and I loved it. There was peace in having no one to impress, no one to explain myself to. I didn't date, not for a long time. I wasn't avoiding love, I was relearning it, rebuilding my relationship with myself. And that required space. Stillness. Claire would check in now and then. We stayed close, two people tethered by something more important than attraction, mutual respect, a quiet companionship. One Sunday, we met for lunch at a lakeside cafe. It had been months since the case closed. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel it," I replied. We sat for a long time, sipping coffee, watching the wind stir ripples across the water. She turned to me and asked, "Do you ever think about her?" I didn't flinch. Sometimes. Not with anger, just clarity. "What would you say to her, if you could say anything?" I thought about that. Took a slow breath. I'd say thank you, for showing me the cost of losing myself, for teaching me what love is not, and for forcing me to finally choose me. Claire nodded, her eyes soft. I think that's the most peaceful kind of closure there is. We didn't label what we had. There was no need. Whatever it was healthy, whole, and unforced. I went home that night, opened a blank page, and wrote the words that had been circling my mind for weeks. Suffering is not a sign of love. Endurance is not the same as loyalty. And walking away is sometimes the bravest way to stay true. In the months that followed, I spoke at a local tech event, sharing how I rebuilt my app and my life. I didn't mention names, didn't air my past, but people came up to me afterward, not to ask about software, but to say, "Thank you, that hit home." And maybe that's the lesson. That healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, in boundaries, in quiet strength, in letting go without needing applause. Emily became a shadow, distant, faded. And Lisa? A warning sign I now recognize in others. But I held no bitterness, because the wounds had closed. And what remained was something softer, wiser. Claire and I began to share more of those quiet moments. Sunset walks, shared playlists, trading books. There was no rush, no expectation, just presence. And one evening, as we watched a storm roll in from her porch, she reached over and took my hand. It wasn't dramatic. It was warm, honest. The kind of gesture that didn't ask for anything, but offered everything. I didn't say anything. I just let myself feel it. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of proving I was enough. I had already proven it. To myself, the most important person of all. And as the rain began to fall, I realized something. Suffering had taught me the limits of forgiveness. But healing had taught me that even broken roads can lead to something beautiful if you're willing to walk them with your eyes open. And no bitterness in your heart. I'm sorry for staying too long in rooms where you weren't respected. I'm sorry for thinking love meant silence. I'm not broken. I'm just done breaking myself for people who wouldn't bleed for me. And as I typed the last word, I knew. I wasn't running anymore. I was preparing to return, not to save the marriage, but to end it. On my terms. With eyes wide open, and a heart no longer begging to be seen. It's strange how healing starts in the smallest ways. For me, it was the way sunlight streamed into Marcus's kitchen every morning, the smell of real coffee not instant, the ache in my legs after a proper workout, the silence of a room where no one was undermining me. It didn't happen all at once, but slowly, deliberately, I began reclaiming myself. First I found a lawyer, quiet, sharp, efficient. Her name was Carla, and when I told her the story, she didn't blink. She simply said, "Good. Let's start building your case." We spent days compiling evidence, Lisa's email, bank statements, proof of forged signatures, audio clips I had started recording after noticing Emily's verbal abuse. Carla was careful, methodical. Every piece she added to the file felt like laying bricks beneath my feet. I wasn't just standing up, I was building something solid. At the same time, I poured myself into something I had shelved for too long. A business idea I once jotted on a napkin and buried in a drawer. A mobile platform for freelancers to manage invoices and taxes in one place. I dusted it off, drafted a proposal, and reached out to a few contacts. To my surprise, they remembered me, and better yet, they believed in me. That's when Claire re-entered the picture. She was a UX designer from my old firm, someone I had collaborated with on a few small projects years ago. We reconnected by chance, an email thread that spiraled into a Zoom call that turned into weekly brainstorming sessions. Claire was everything Emily hadn't been in years, attentive, respectful, collaborative. Not romantic, not yet, just kind. She never asked about my marriage. She didn't need to. She listened when I vented. She offered perspective when I got stuck. She reminded me, in the gentlest ways, that my thoughts had value. And that kindness, it lit a fuse in me. I started waking up earlier, cooking real meals, reading again, laughing, for no reason. One afternoon, after a particularly productive planning session, Claire said something that stuck with me. "You're not just rebuilding your life, Brian. You're redesigning it. And this time it's all yours." That night, I looked in the mirror and didn't just see someone surviving. I saw someone returning. In the meantime, Carla kept working. She pulled property records, tracked the mortgage Emily had tried to secure. Turns out, the deal was falling through. Emily didn't qualify without my signature. The entire plan she and Lisa concocted was unraveling. I kept my distance, didn't contact Emily, but I watched quietly. Her calls became less frequent. Her texts turned polite, almost robotic. "Hey, just checking in. Hope you're okay. Let me know if you need anything. Can we talk soon?" But I wasn't interested in talking. I was interested in closure. I spent nights writing again, not about loss, but vision, goals, possibilities. I made a vision board, laughed at myself for it, but it worked. Seeing my dreams pinned on a wall made them feel real again. I even called my parents, told them everything. There were tears. My mother said, "I always knew you were stronger than you let on." It meant everything. The day my startup's beta version went live, I sat in silence for a moment and just breathed. I had done something for myself. Not for approval, not for love, for me. And that was the first time I realized I wasn't the same man Emily left behind. I was better. Claire started sending me articles, some about business, others about healing. One night, she forwarded a TED Talk about emotional resilience. I watched it twice. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about pretending to be unbreakable. It was about rebuilding slowly, truthfully. That hit me. We began walking after our meetings, and virtual coffee turned into real hikes, still nothing romantic, just human, grounded. I needed that more than anything. One morning, while reviewing user feedback for the app, I received a message from a freelancer who said, "This is exactly what I needed. You've just saved me hours every week." I sat back, closed my eyes, and smiled. Not because it was praise, because it felt like a purpose. I was creating something meaningful, something Emily had stopped seeing in me long ago, and it no longer mattered whether she ever would again. Meanwhile, Carla finalized the legal steps. "We're ready," she said. "You've got a clean, strong case. Now it's just a matter of how you want to play it." I nodded, slowly, because I already knew. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to blame. I was going to end it the same way I rebuilt myself. Quietly, powerfully, and entirely on my terms. I returned home on a Friday afternoon. Quietly, no drama, just walked through the door like I had taken a short trip, which, in a way, I had. Emily was surprised, but not in a panicked way, more like she didn't expect me to come back so soon, or at all. "Hey," she said, hesitantly, "you okay?" I nodded. Just needed space. And just like that, she assumed I had folded, that I had forgiven. The next few days she acted like nothing had happened, made breakfast, laughed at old sitcom reruns, left her phone out like it was some kind of trophy for trust. But I wasn't here to pretend. I was here to end it. Over the next 3 weeks, I played the part, calm, present, polite. I made dinner, I cleaned, I even complimented her hair when she got it cut, but all the while Carla and I were finalizing the documents. Claire had warned me, make sure you're emotionally detached before you step into that courtroom. This isn't just about law, it's about power. She was right. The morning I filed for divorce, I wore a navy suit and a tie Emily had once gifted me on our 3rd anniversary. It felt like reclaiming something, a memory, maybe, or just the idea of who I used to be. The papers included everything: her financial deception, the forged mortgage documents, Lisa's threatening email, recordings of emotional manipulation, even third-party evaluations from Carla's legal network. I left the envelope on the kitchen table. Emily found it that evening. I was sitting on the patio with a cup of tea, watching the sky turn gold. She slammed the door open. "What the hell is this?" I didn't flinch. "Divorce?" She blinked. "You can't be serious." "I'm serious enough to notarize it." Her voice rose. "You come back, act normal for weeks, and now this? Why? Why now?" I took a sip. "Because now I've built something solid, because now I'm clear, and because I wanted to make sure this wasn't anger talking." She looked at the papers, then at me. "You blindsided me." As I shook my head, "No, you blindsided yourself." She tried to argue, deny, even manipulate. "Brian, you're making a mistake. We can fix this." "Fix what? The lies? The fraud? The way you treated me? Like a backup plan?" She softened her tone. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was confused. Lisa, she made me believe things that weren't." I nodded slowly. "And you let her." The court day came 2 weeks later. Emily showed up looking sharp, designer blouse, polished makeup, perfect smile, but underneath I could see the panic. The mask was cracking. Carla presented everything methodically, with precision. The judge barely had to ask questions. Emily tried to speak, tried to twist the story. "She's exaggerating." "See?" Carla interrupted. "You mean the attorney who has documents, recordings, and timestamps?" Emily shrank into her seat. Then came my turn to speak. I didn't rant. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I'm not here to punish Emily. I'm here to protect what's left of myself. I'm not seeking revenge. I'm seeking reality. And the reality is, this marriage ended the day respect died." The room went silent. The judge ruled in my favor. Complete division of assets as proposed. No spousal support. Property rights reverted due to fraud. And a formal note on record regarding emotional coercion. Outside the courtroom, Emily tried again. "Brian, please, don't let it end like this." I looked at her, really looked, the woman I once loved, and saw someone I no longer recognized. "It already ended, Emily. You just didn't notice." She reached out. "We had something real." I stepped back. "We did, and then you replaced it with something convenient." She stood there, silent, and for once, Lisa wasn't beside her. I walked away. Not fast. Not triumphant. Just steady. Because this wasn't a victory. This was liberation. After the ruling, Carla patted my shoulder and whispered, "That's how you win with dignity." Emily remained in the hallway for a long while, staring at the courtroom doors like she expected them to swing back open and undo everything. But there was no undoing what she had allowed to rot. A few days later, I received an email, short, desperate. I didn't know how far things had gone. "I miss you. I miss you. Please don't shut me out completely." I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded to Carla, who smiled and said, "Classic manipulation. Let's keep it on record." Lisa, as I later learned, had gone radio silent. When the mortgage failed and the bank started looking into the falsified signatures, she backed off entirely. No visits, no calls. She left Emily to deal with the wreckage. Claire and Marcus celebrated the end of the case with me at a quiet dinner. We didn't toast to revenge. We toasted to freedom. And as I looked around that table, I realized something powerful. This wasn't just about escaping a toxic marriage. It was about finally stepping into the life I should have built all along. Not under someone else's shadow, but under my own damn light. The fall wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, gradual, inescapable. Lisa's unraveling began with a single phone call from the mortgage broker. A simple verification turned into a red flag. The forged signatures led to internal audits. Questions were asked, and soon people started digging deeper. Turns out Lisa had a history, a string of advisory roles in small businesses where money had quietly gone missing. Until now, no one had looked closely. But once her name surfaced in the fraud investigation tied to our case, others came forward. A yoga studio owner, a single mom who'd trusted Lisa with a home loan, a local nonprofit that misplaced funds during a fundraiser that Lisa managed. The truth broke fast and wide. She was dropped from 2 boards within a week. Her name was scrubbed from websites. Clients disappeared overnight. Social media turned from polished self-help quotes to silence. When a local paper ran a piece titled "The Charmer Who Cut Corners," Lisa vanished. No more brunches, no more visits, just voicemail. Emily, meanwhile, watched her world contract. Friends who had once praised her taste and social circles started backing away. "She lied to you?" one asked. "No," someone else replied. "She knew. She just didn't care." When the divorce details became public, especially the fraud, the email threats, the court ruling, Emily's image crumbled. She tried to fix it, hosted a dinner party that no one attended, sent apology texts to people who didn't reply, even posted a filtered selfie with the caption, "New Beginnings," only to be met with deafening silence. Her workplace began to feel it too. Parents questioned her credibility. Colleagues grew distant. One administrator told Marcus, who knew someone on staff, that there were concerns about her judgment outside the classroom. She sent me a handwritten letter, delivered by courier. "Brian, I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you. I was lost. Lisa twisted things, and I let her. I regret it every single day. Please, if you ever find it in your heart to forgive me, I'll be here." I read it once, then placed it in a drawer. Because forgiveness is one thing, excess is another. I didn't need to respond. She knew. The last message she sent me was a single line. "I missed the way you looked at me before everything broke." And I did, once. But I'd stopped looking long ago. I had no reason to look back. I heard through Marcus that Lisa tried to land a new consulting job in another city, but the internet has a long memory. Background checks flagged the legal mess, and references weren't returning her calls. The same charm that once opened doors now locked them shut. Her carefully curated image, empowered businesswoman, financial mentor for women, truth teller, crumbled. One by one, her old posts were deleted. Podcasts she'd guested on pulled episodes. No one wanted to be associated with her name. Emily, meanwhile, stopped being invited to anything. She tried organizing a birthday lunch for a mutual friend. No one came. She posted vacation throwbacks. People commented with awkward emojis, or worse, nothing. Marcus ran into her at a grocery store, said she looked thin, tired, asked how she was doing. She just shook her head and said, "I didn't know losing respect would feel so much like losing air." She had confused attention for affection, control for care, hour for love. And when all of that evaporated, she was left with nothing solid beneath her feet. People didn't hate her. They just no longer believed her. And when the world stops believing you, silence is the only echo that answers. Meanwhile, I kept building. Quietly and apologetically. And I never looked back.